call roll. What do you think?
Secretary.
Pulling up that thing again, 'cause I'm always. Yeah, sorry.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Trustee Fox,
Here.
Trustee Fairfax here, Trustee Chakraborty here.
Yeah.
I mean, here.
Hi.
Trustee
Yeah.
Chakraborty.
Here.
This is great.
And Lee is here too. Yes, hi. And we are joined by Koya. No, I did not get a public comment about this meeting. Anybody else get public comment?
We have both Amber and Tricia.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
And yes.
There's nobody here to give public comments, and then nobody signed up. So I think that moves us right along into our agenda for today, which is the executive search. The main work for today is to obviously have a debrief about the candidates that we've been interviewing this week. Again, we're in open session right now, so let's not have any identifying markers. But before we move into closed session to talk about specific candidates, what are the things that we should be talking about in open session? Trish and Amber, you had some ideas, right, of things that we should probably, updates that we should probably have?
Yep, and I'll kick it to Amber. We are going to debrief in a closed session. Sometimes it's easier to debrief when you know what the next steps are, so I think that that's something we want to make sure we cover in this, and so I'll kick it to Amber to walk us through that.
Sure. So as a reminder to everybody, we have been through screening process with Koya, a first round interview with the search committee. We just conducted second round interviews. First round interviews were fully scripted. Every candidate got the same exact questions. In the second round, folks were asked to come prepared with an opening statement. That opening statement was predicated on a prompt that every candidate got. So same prompt for each candidate. The follow-up questions varied between things that were specific to each candidate and things that were a little bit scripted. So we knew we wanted to ask each person. We'll debrief in closed session, but kind of the next phase looking forward is committee debriefing and selecting final candidates, or preparing to select final candidates. We will move forward into a board meeting on the 18th, in which the board will kind of get to hear this committee's debrief and discuss candidates in detail. And that's when the final selection will be made of finalists. We said from the beginning that we'd have 1 to 3 finalists. We're on track for that. And those finalists will come to a half-day in-person interview. We have a sample schedule that we've shared and discussed previously, but I think one thing to name is that at the board meeting next week, we'd want to go over that and not only select finalists, but also confirm that this kind of sample schedule is what we would indeed like to do. And then look ahead to what scheduling will look like with the board. So probably early March would be a time when final candidates would meet in person. I think, I'll pause in case there are any questions or anything you'd add, but I've got a little bit more framing before we move into kind of closed session and debriefing that might be useful as well.
Is the hope, and I know that nothing is set in stone, but is the hope that the search committee as a committee has non-binding, obviously, recommendations to the board by the end of today? Would that, you think, be part of your update? Okay, I want to make sure, and I can do this and put it in writing too, but I want to make sure that if there's consensus, fantastic, even if there's not consensus or whatever, but regardless, that the board doesn't feel obligated to accept our recommendations, like even if they haven't, they've been really kind, the rest of the board has, I feel like, deferred to us on everything, but this is an important decision. So I think that if there are disagreements or if there's red flags that we've missed or considerations, that those need to be taken pretty seriously. So just that we're serious about it being recommendations and not too precious necessarily. Does that seem okay to everybody?
Yes. And will Madarima, as head of the search committee, be giving the presentation to the board about?
I will
what we do?
not. I will not because I am not going to be here. So, I will send my notes forward. Of course, they won't be part of the like official board packet or anything. I feel very confident that I will express my opinion today among the four of us. And I like, I think that in terms of just my opinion, I have no worries about that being represented in terms of actually presenting the, let's say, the search committee's recommendations. I believe that's sort of what Koya will be doing at the board meeting, right? Is as part of your presentation, go over what the search committee maybe has talked about, and of course the three of
Thank
you
you.
would be there. So
Thank you.
And I think for the board meeting next week, what we imagine is first updating our search summary, which we previously shared with the full board headed into the second round interviews, and the recommendation would be embedded within that summary. So when we meet with the board next week, we'll work through that search summary. We'll answer any questions that they might have about process or timeline or candidate slate or anything like that. We would share a little bit of information on mitigating bias with the board to kind of tee you up for that debrief session that you'll be having. Answer any questions that might arise there. I think one thing to note is that almost all board members have been through a mitigating bias training at this point. There's only one board member who has not yet been involved in the process, who has not. So it'll be familiar to most folks. And then I think, we would, if needed, we can join you in closed session briefly to present any commentary on that's specific to candidates before Trish and I would depart and leave the board to their debrief and decision making on who the finalist candidates are. One other thing I'll note to Madarima's point about it being a recommendation, we had another board member join us for the second round of interviews. So the search committee is going to make a recommendation, but I think to that point of it not being maybe fully set in stone, there will be an opportunity for that person as well to share their thoughts and feedback on how these second round interviews went and further inform the boards for debrief on candidates.
I have a question, and that's I think some of this might pertain to the specific candidate, so maybe we come back into open session, after our closed session discussion, or maybe we should consider that that's something we may have to do, is talk about some of this afterwards. But I was thinking that our discussion about, we said we wanted 1 to 3 candidates, right, as finalists. And I was wondering if there is a financial aspect to that decision, which we may not be in a position to make on behalf of the full board. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
What it costs to bring candidates,
Yeah.
here. So if that, I think that maybe we could talk about, and when we're talking about in closed session, the specific candidates, maybe one of the things that we could keep in mind is if we wanted to bring X number, then these are the people. If we are okay bringing whatever, but also that I might want to send the board and maybe specifically Matt or maybe Billy questions about like how much it might cost like per candidate or something, because of course that's a financial decision that would need to be.
Two thoughts on that. I have two thoughts just immediately on hearing that. One is I want to make sure that we don't have that weighing in terms of our thoughts about which candidates, in terms of the expense for bringing one candidate versus another. I think that's critical.
Yeah.
And then the second thought I had is I think it's important to invest in this process in all the ways that we have with all of our time, all of our volunteer time and Koya's expertise. And I think that expenses to have candidates here, anywhere from 1 to 3 for in-person interviews, I think is well spent. Like, we don't want to be cautious of, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, like,
Process,
it seems
you
like
know.
penny wise and pound foolish, like
Yes.
we'll lose something. And I actually completely agree. I just meant as a process, we may not get to decide without the full board's okaying like an expense. Do you know what I mean? So I am happy to, support your statement, because that, about the financial consideration and how it should or should not affect our decision at this point. But I just feel like that was just something that was occurring to me, is like, we may literally not be able to make a decision in any case, because there's a financial component to it.
Well, I don't think we should make a decision
Right.
without it going to the full board,
Yeah,
with or without the financial.
I do think having that understanding is helpful in terms of logistics, right? So you're going to meet as a board on the 18th. You'll determine your final candidates. We as a search committee, minus Madarima, of course, but we as a search committee will meet again on the 21st, and we'll talk about kind of the results of that board meeting on the 18th and lay out our immediate next steps. So if our immediate next steps mean that we need to take a little bit of time to understand what is possible, what isn't possible, any processes for getting candidates in person, it would be great to have that understanding, because that would probably dictate a little bit when those final interviews would happen, right? Like, if we need a little bit more time to go through that process of flights and hotels or whatever it might be, that might mean we meet, the interviews are actually the week of the 10th of March. If that is a quick and easy process, maybe the interviews are the week of the 3rd. So knowing that information would be helpful,
And
just
I think
in
we should,
forecasting.
I think we should try and go for the quicker process and getting it earlier in March if we can. And I think once we embarked on a nationwide search, that's part of it, so.
yeah, no, agreed.
You
In
know,
fact,
I just, yeah.
what I wrote down is a question that I will make sure that we have an answer to going into the board meeting, is whether or not the board would need to vote. So, because again, if there's a motion, we would need to vote in open session about just something specific like candidate travel, or if that is in fact like assumed to be one of the costs with the search that we've already approved of.
Right,
Approved, no.
if it needs to be an agenda item.
Right, exactly, that's what I'm
Right,
trying to,
and
that's what I'm trying to figure out, yeah,
New business to approve, okay.
yeah. So I'll make sure I flag that for, the agenda hasn't gone out, right? Do you know?
Actually, we met with Matt today to finalize it, but we've not formally, like, it's not set in stone. We can add that to it if we need to.
Okay, so do you think you could hold off, or I can send an email or whatever to Matt too, or to Susie to ask to hold off just until we see if this needs to actually be an agenda item, and then,
We can, it has to be finalized and go out by Friday,
yeah,
but yeah,
Okay.
I'll mention that. And then, yeah, if we can email Matt and get him to sign off on that.
okay, thank you.
So I think maybe to recap, so we're clear on our immediate next steps. We will in this move into a closed session and debrief. Tricia and I will take that information. We will update the packet of information for the board, and we will get that to you to be shared with them before the 18th at that board meeting where Tricia and I will come and present. And then this search committee will meet again on the 21st, and we'll want to know, and we can send this as a reminder to folks, we'll want to know the finalists, any concerns around the kind of the final process. Will, as part of that summary, kind of include what we've got as our example schedule. Any information we need to know on getting started for kind of the logistics, the next steps, any questions around scheduling there. And then one other thing that we'll make sure to do on the 21st is talk in a little bit more detail about staff update and how to prep them to be involved in the next phase of the process as well. And we'll be clear about, how references fit in and those kinds of things. So the meeting on the 21st, I think, will be pretty logistics heavy. But we'll get you set up to follow that along with us. Well,
Do any staff members or the leadership team need to go through mitigating bias training?
yeah, we discussed doing one with the direct reports, excuse me, the leadership team specifically. And then we could certainly offer to all staff. I don't know that we can 100% guarantee, like, this is something I'd want your thoughts on really, Lee. Like, we could offer an all staff, anybody could drop in, but I don't know if there's a way to know that people like that we're going to get everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it is impossible to get over 120 staff members. We try our hardest. I mean, we can talk about that, what that process looks like. But it depends on like part-time, full-time, who's in the building, who's able to log in. Like it kind of depends on people's schedule. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Definitely like bias training for the leadership team, I think makes sense.
Yeah.
And then
I
have
think
something. Go ahead. Sorry, Amber.
Sorry, Trisha. I was gonna say for all staff, I think something written, like we can
That's what I
share
was gonna
some
say,
written information as part of the packet of information that we
Yeah.
give them. And we can offer a time when folks can come and ask us questions about that. But so I think, we can ensure that all staff get written information, but I don't know that we can really ensure that all staff go through a kind of Zoom training with us, but we can offer that option. Certainly though, I think direct reports.
And
go
for
through
the
that training.
in-person, will one of you be here in person, or both of you, or?
Would you like us to, one of us, to facilitate those days? You'll probably have to get budget approval for that as we're talking about it.
Sure, but if we go with what Suzanne said earlier, where if that's not, well, I would say yes. I would say that might be a good thing. And I guess my thinking, I don't know, Suzanne, what you were thinking, but my thinking is that the candidates probably know you all better than they know us. So I feel like it would be candidate friendly to have you here.
Yeah, and I think.
Back in the day, we used to always come for these interviews. It's just after COVID, then it got like by discretion. So we're happy, happy to. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's something we were kind of talking about when we were selecting a firm, was like, but there are local parts of Koya, but they're not local. But that for the final, we would have somebody in person. I would advocate for that. Because it would also, we can talk more about it. It could potentially be very helpful.
What do you think, Ted, Lee? I mean, again, if there's something sensitive that we should cover in closed session, we can do that, but.
So this would also be something we would bring to the full board on the 18th as an additional cost.
Well, that's the thing, is that I don't know that it is an additional, or I don't know, well, I will.
We'll find out if it's, it seems to be something, these were things that were expected when we first embarked on this process.
Yeah. We don't have to buy the plane tickets before the 18th, so for Trish and or Amber. So we have time to figure that out, but I think the outside of the money the money piece, which is not insignificant, but outside of that, is there, I don't know, what are your thoughts about having Koya present in person? I'm for it, just to be clear.
I'm for it. I think if one of you wasn't present, then I would want to know, like, logistically, what would that look like? Would it be, me kind of being the point person for the candidate as they go through the day? Would that be our director of HR? Just things like that.
And it does make scheduling a little more difficult because we're scheduling with more people.
What, having one more
We're
person?
pretty flexible, but
Okay.
Um, yeah, or would it be either Monterima as the committee chair or the board president? Like, you
I
know,
mean, if it
since
can
it's
work
board
out with one
hearing,
of us there,
Yeah.
I think if
if it,
you weren't here, that's what I would.
I will
I'm sorry,
say
go ahead.
it might be helpful, just to maybe it's helpful to give a sense of the example schedule, because um, I understand your point, Suzanne, about Madarima, but um, this is likely a half day, starting maybe around noon and going to like 6:30. And so it would cut into work hours, which might mean that it's helpful to have Trisha and or I, or helpful to have Lee play a logistics role, just depending on scheduling. Because some of this, it could be 3 half days, up to 3 half days of not at work.
Oh, 3 separate half days?
Yeah.
Right.
Also, I would imagine that there are things at which board members probably shouldn't be, right? So I might be thinking about, or I'm thinking about something like meeting with the leadership team. Obviously, I would not be there, so then it might be,
See, that's what would be great to have one of them. Because then for the board, meeting with the board, you know, there might be places that those kind of different parts to navigate,
yeah.
you know, to have the consistency of somebody from Koya. So
And
then
yeah.
there's board that's not
Right.
staff, or staff that's not board, or.
I know, there's also things like, you know, if we're taking the candidate to lunch and or dinner or whatever, while I would like to believe that Amber and Trish know the geography of Oak Park pretty well, like chances are that, you know, like it should be somebody here. So again, I'm thinking Lee, but I wouldn't want Lee to be here beyond or much beyond your, you know, regular working hours or whatever, you know?
My schedule is flexible enough that I can be here when I need to be here.
Okay, so then we can probably like do a combo, you know, so that maybe the people from Koya are like a consistent presence. You know, and then in terms of literally who gets what, who walks who where, it can be a combo of Lee and or me, or if you're already here, then you were, you know, we can do some of that, but make sure.
And the way that we're seeing this is that the third round, with however many we have, that's the final round, and then there's an offer made. Because last time we just had one person that we went to dinner with, and I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear. This in-person visit, however many we have going forward, after next week, then that's the final, and then an offer's made, is the anticipation.
One thing I'll add about that is we will build in some time to get feedback. So similar to the rubric that you've all been using as search committee members as you've met candidates, we'll share that with certainly direct reports and with the full board and ask for completion within a reasonable time, 3 days tops, I think, unless somebody has any reason why that seems too quick, and turn that around to you all in a report. So at the end of this process, what you'll have is, you know, all of your initial notes from the Koya team on each candidate, your first round, your second round, your final round experience with them as you're participating in either the direct report meeting in Lee's case or the board meeting in board members' case, plus feedback from board, from direct reports, from all staff, and from references to kind of digest and think about the next step, which is an offer.
Okay, but there's not another, like, just
Sometimes, like if, for example, a candidate raised something like, you know, I've received an offer, but I'd love to talk to somebody one-on-one and like just get details about X, Y, or Z, we might add in that step at a candidate's request. For example, I've done that in the past when a candidate has had question about the HR benefits, like the health benefits. I don't know how to answer that. Like we put them in touch with somebody at the company and you know, they got those answers and then they were able to sign the offer letter with confidence. So I think the one caveat Suzanne, you are 99% correct, with the one caveat that if something comes up, particularly from the candidate side, we'll raise that and might incorporate one more meeting or call or something to answer any questions that they might have.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Well, we would love to make it work. I do think that sure, clients handle these things sometimes on their own, but it is nice that you don't have to think about things like greeting candidates, is lunch coming, do people have water, taking, switching out the room. Like there's just like a host in some ways that's nice to have there, and we're happy to do that. I mean, Lee, you would have to like show us where everything is and beforehand and that kind of stuff, but but it kind of really allows you to stay focused and present on
Yeah.
candidates.
Well, I mean, I wonder, again, not giving away any candidate information, but I wonder if like a tour of the library or something is part of the, or could be part of the half day, whatever. In which case, you all might also be experts by the end of the.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, if it is helpful, we'd posed kind of arrival and tour of the library as the first step, a lunch with we haven't decided who that lunch might be with, but kind of easing folks in, welcoming them to their half-day interview, like having maybe a little bit of the kind of like easier things first. A break built in, an interview with direct reports, an all staff meet and greet, a break, and then a full board interview. So those are the pieces that we kind of previously discussed, would want to put into that packet of information for that board meeting on the 18th, so you could finalize.
Did we take the candidate to dinner last time? Okay. So maybe after the full board?
Unless lunch serves that purpose, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I think it depends
'Cause-
on who you want that kind of informal meal to be with, whether, because if it's lunch, then maybe it's direct reports, maybe it's Susie and Lee as the co-interims, maybe it's if a board member can do lunch, maybe it is a board member. But I think it depends on like who you want to have that kind of informal breaking of bread with. If you want it to be the board, then it probably should be dinner and we should shift. If you want it to be another group, then it could be lunch.
Yeah.
If it's the full board, then it's probably easier to do dinner.
Though right, I'm trying to think about, like, I don't think we should do both, right? Because that just seems like an exhausting, again, in my area, and when academics do campus visits, it's like a day and a half, it's.
Oh, it's a marathon.
Right, like you.
I've done them.
And so it's, 24 hours, 30 hours of just being on, on. So, but that's not a good thing about academia.
No.
So we don't, we want to make sure that
after academia.
we want to make sure that the candidate doesn't have to be on for quite as long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These are all things that I think, in that updated search summary, which will be kind of the cover page of the packet we share with the board, will highlight some of these as specific questions. So, we'll ask the board to consider cost, whether or not they want COIA. Is this example schedule the correct schedule? Here are areas in which we haven't made a decision, like is it lunch or is it dinner? Would be great for the board to kind of either weigh in or say that the search committee can decide on the 21st. That way, when we meet on the 21st, we're ready to start kind of moving through the logistics.
Okay. So because I won't be here, on the 18th or on the 21st for those meetings, I'm just trying to figure out, like I'm happy to just defer giving my opinion on this one matter, which is so hard for me to say. Just, you can just decide without me. It's becoming very hard to say, but like, but if I can absolutely do that, or, you know, if there was, I don't know, I'm thinking that maybe lunch with some staff is probably better, because I'm thinking that the board is the group that is actually going to hire them, right? So I feel like that pressure on the candidate is worse maybe than having with people that would be directly reporting to them. Does that make sense? With the, I mean, I don't know.
Wait, dinner, I remember, did we do dinner? Am I imagining things?
No, I don't think we did dinner. I mean, I don't remember.
No, we didn't.
I don't, well, right. I think
Yeah, we didn't.
the last ED, yeah, probably, I remember it came with like, who was interim director after David?
Lori.
Oh, that's right, Lori. I remember came in with Lori, so I don't have Lori and Jocelyn to have, anyway, whatever. But all of that to just say that I'm trying to figure out if I have a recommendation, or if we should have a recommendation as a committee about what the schedule should be, or if that's 18/21st decision.
I'm inclined toward dinner with the board, but that's just my perspective, clearly. Koya has done this more, so I welcome their input, I welcome your input in terms of staff, I welcome your guys' input, you know. That's just my,
I believe that with the previous executive director, we had an in-person meeting at the branch library, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah,
I
sometimes
think-
I think clients like to see what candidates are in a more casual setting. But it would be
guess I've
followed by
not
something
done
formal.
Yeah, I think one thing that might be the deciding factor is actually the logistics. We right now, for example, have the full board interview happening after work hours because our operating assumption in this kind of sample, and we could be wrong, right? So this is, I think, a good thing to talk through with the board next week. But we have the full board interview happening after work. So say, for example, from 5 to 6:30, which would mean dinner's probably from 7 to 8:30. And can board members do that potentially 3 nights in a row? If the answer is yes, then maybe we do want to do a dinner with the board. If the answer is no, it's already a stretch to do an in-person interview from 5 to 6:30 3 nights in a row, then maybe we do veer towards a lunch with staff instead to have that kind of casual cultivation with a candidate.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, wouldn't it be nicer for staff to get a lunch? Because they have to be here anyway.
I know, but I'm thinking from the standpoint of like seeing the candidate in different kinds of environments and getting, like,
Yeah.
you know, like in the interviews we've done already, there's that point where we're asking questions and it's kind of formal, and then when they start asking us questions, it becomes less formal and more like conversational. I personally would benefit from something that's really conversational, and whether that's over dinner or whether we make sure that our last time with them is like that. But for us, it would be easier because we've done it. The rest of the board, it will be their first time with the candidate,
Yeah.
so it might not. So
I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying. I mean, like you, I'm thinking about my experiences where I hated that it felt like I didn't know if the meal was a meal or if it was a trap. You know, like, so again,
being a candidate,
right, being
Yeah.
from the candidate's perspective, but maybe there's like a snacks thing at the end of the meeting with the board, you know, like where they're just kind of hanging out for a few minutes and you just talk, and whoever, I don't know if that makes some kind of sense, where you just have a informal wind down, you know, that's not as, I don't know.
And maybe I'll add to, I think you could do something like that and it could be optional. So if board members did have to leave to other commitments, they could do so. I think the other thing to your point, Suzanne, is maybe it's helpful to remind folks what the all staff, what the interview with direct reports and what the board interview looks like, because the full board interview is intended to be more conversational, right? We've had a first round with the search committee, very scripted, a second round that's kind of scripted, kind of open. This final with the full board could be very conversational. The one note I want to make is that we do have that list of questions from the community survey, and this is where we plug a lot of those in. So I think in terms of prepping staff, for example, all staff, we could be using some of those questions as example questions for staff who might ask their own questions, but at least have some of those kind of front and center to plug in if they need to. I think with direct reports, we could have a very targeted list that both come from the community survey, but also from direct reports on like what they want to know. So maybe the direct reports interview is a bit more scripted. But with the full board, it could be, here are some of the outstanding questions from the community that weren't asked in the all staff or direct reports that you could ask as a board. And also in the remainder of the time you have with them, you could ask whatever you want.
Okay, shall we see where it all falls out? Like when we're having our meeting on the 21st, is it?
Yeah,
Is
so
there something we can decide then? Kind of how the structure of the day goes?
I think the question on the 18th is, does the board need to decide together on the 18th, or do they delegate this to the search committee? In which case the search committee, we can decide this on the 21st. But as part of that search summary we give to the board, I want to include all this information and some of these questions. And I think the board could go through and answer those questions, or the board could say, you search committee are going to decide this on the 21st and let us know.
And our board has been very trusting of the search committee, so.
And
yeah, no, absolutely. I do think that the reason and the way we keep that up is by making sure that we check in with them, right? Like, so even if they say, we're okay with you making the decision, we could still press to say what would be more or less inconvenient for you, what are the like get their input anyway, so those voices are in our head as we are deciding. Okay. So that's what would happen on the 18th and the 21st. What are some of the other, now I'm trying to go back to the email use. I think it came from you, right, Amber, about next steps and what we wanted to decide, maybe even in the open session today?
Yeah, I think that's it in the open session. We did a little bit of a overview of the process to date. Talked about how we're weaving in the mitigating bias training, and then overviewed our next steps, which is the debrief of the second round interviews with the full board on the 18th. That will include a selection of candidates and confirmation either of that final interview process, or confirmation that the team on the 21st can make, the search committee on the 21st can make that decision. Those were all the things that we wanted to share in open session. The only other piece that I would kind of put a pin in is at the board meeting, starting the conversation around scheduling. So like, if I remember correctly, you get back from Mexico the 4th. So do we want to try and, what is the board's schedule? What is direct report schedule? What are folks' schedules to have these interviews? Is it the week of the 3rd right after you get back, or is it the week of the 10th? Is it not possible till the following week? That kind of thing. But I think we'll need a full board conversation there, or confirmation from the board that they're willing to do a doodle or something like that we send them to get some times on calendars. We don't need to do that now. I just wanted to name that scheduling piece is going to be part of the puzzle here.
I may regret this later on, but I actually get back on the 3rd and not the 4th. So that's another day for you to play with in your schedule land.
Okay.
Okay.
I think with that though, we are prepared to, on our end at least, move into closed session and have Trisha lead us through a debrief of the most recent round of interviews.
Okay. Real quick, I wanted to ask: is there how many finalists we ask to come to this in-person thing, does that, in our perspective, or you all's perspective, depend on anything else except for how the conversation about particular candidates go?
No.
Okay, so it's all, I also, for me also, it's dependent on how our discussion goes about the candidates, but I wanted to make sure that was it. Okay, perfect. Okay, so in that case, we're ready to move to closed session. I would love to hear a.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And I will see everybody in closed session. I'm not sure if members from Koya are joining us, but I did want to say that we're done with the work of the closed session. Before we adjourn open session, is there anything else that needs to be done in open session?
I think so.
Unless there's anything we need from you, our fearless leader.
Actually, can you be the fearless leader on the 21st?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not even asked.
Well, she's an officer on the board, which is fine. You're absolutely essential for all the things that need to be seconded, so.
Or moved.
Or moved, yes. Okay, then in that case, having completed the work of our meetings today, I declare us adjourned.
Okay.